I know what you're thinking. What does this video have to do with church?
Now, if you haven't watched our kind of video, click there.
Okay, in our previous video, small group, we talked about the term small group. Imagine that.
Shocking.
And we talked about how that term, small group, is Christianese, where our video kind of takes us well beyond the realm of Christianese.
See, kind of is an example of what's called in the field of linguistics powerless language. Now, powerless language is language that makes the speaker appear weak or incompetent or insecure.
There is a lot to powerless language. There's vocabulary, there's inflection in the way you speak, there's syntax.
There's so much that there's been 40 years of research on this topic in several different fields: linguistics, communication, social psychology. What you need to know for now is this: that instrumental men, otherwise known as your average Joe, avoid powerless language. It's something that is used by women. So much so that the originator of the phrase, a feminist linguist by the name of Robin Lakoff, originally called it the feminine register. And in 2011, a study in the corporate setting in England found that women were 4 times more likely to use powerless language than men were. And regardless of whether you're male or female, if you use powerless language, you come across as weak, insecure, incompetent, and you are less effective as a leader. And you know what? The church is saturated with it.
So church communication has become unmasculine, weak, and detrimental to leadership.
Exactly. And the word become is important because church communication has changed over the last 50 years.
Now this gets heavy quick, but we're going to save you the lecture.
Oh, we could lecture on it.
You do lecture on it.
Yeah.
You lecture your doctoral students on it.
Yeah, it's
but I am not a doctoral student, and I don't want to sit through that.
Okay.
So to save you that, I'm going to tell you from my own experiences. I talk to church staff members on a regular basis, and I frequently hear the phrase kind of in their natural communication. So much so that it's not uncommon for me to hear the phrase kind of said in a sentence up to 3 times.
Wow.
Now, what does that look like? Well, I've heard something to the extent of, well, I just kind of heard God kind of saying to me that I kind of didn't need to read my Bible more.
Wow. I don't know about you, but when God speaks to me, there's no kind of about it. He jerks my tail. You know, it may be a still small voice, but he jerks my tail.
Yeah, God doesn't ever kind of tell me to kind of do something.
Yeah, and we're told that we ought to be the same way. Matthew 5:37 says, "Let your yes be yes, and your no be no." None of these qualifiers. That's what a kind of or a sort of is. It's a qualifier that softens the impact of the statement. Jesus didn't speak that way.
How do we know that?
Well, Matthew, again, in this time in chapter 7:29, says that the people were amazed at Jesus because he spoke as one who had authority, not like the teachers of the law.
So wait a minute. The people back in Jesus' day recognized that Christ spoke powerfully, and the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, used powerless language.
Well, they didn't say they used powerless language.
Well, obviously they didn't use that term,
Yeah, but yeah,
same effect.
yeah, that they were wishy-washy in the way that they talked. They were afraid to take a stand or make a definite statement. And here, Jesus and his cousin John stand out in that regard. Jesus says to the Pharisees, "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed blowing in the wind?" No. John took a stand.
Now, for the past 25 years, you've been doing research.
Yeah.
I've grown up with this, like I said, the lecture, my whole life.
He's gotten a lot of lectures.
Yeah. And we're continuing to do research today. In fact,
I never stop.
Yeah, we are tracking powerless language of churches watching their services online. We have other churches out collecting their own. If you want to be a part of this, you can email us at churchwithoutballs@gmail.com, and just in the subject line put powerless language research. We will send you the information you need to do this at your church.
The forms that you use, everything.
Now, what we have gotten back so far shows us that kind of is frequently used. Also, its sister term, sort of. And we see that in service, from the church leaders, kind of or sort of is used 1 to 2 times per minute.
Now, that may not seem like much, but when it's combined with other powerless language, vocabulary, syntax, speech patterns, inflection, we've seen powerless language used over 25 times from the platform or the pulpit.
That's a lot. I compare that to what your average Joe does. Your average Joe uses powerless language on average once or twice a minute.
Not 25 times a minute.
No. So when the average Joe hears somebody using 25 times powerless language a minute, 25 times powerless, he perceives that person as incompetent or insecure, nothing that is positive.
Yeah.
Now the question is, why as Christians have we adopted this communication style?
Well, there's several reasons, but perhaps the biggest one is that Christians are concerned about coming on too strong. A high value for Christians is humility.
Rightly so.
We want to appear humble. And of course, appear humble might be the important part of that phrase. Saying God kind of told me makes you appear less proud, less conceited, more humble, if you will.
On the flip side, it makes your faith look weak. So, are you sure God is speaking to you or aren't you? And are you sure what he's saying to you is true? So, do you really believe what you're saying?
Yeah. People are afraid that they'll look prideful. And that's okay. We should be watching ourselves as far as that's concerned. But when we use powerless language to show humility because we want to appear humble, it sounds a lot like false humility to me.
And Christians are known for their false humility. I think powerless language might be a contributing factor to why Christians are perceived as being falsely humble.
People talk about Christians putting on airs and acting humble when they aren't really. Now, it's important to understand that kind of is not always powerless language.
For example,
it's kind of like Assassin's Creed meets Resident Evil.
Is an appropriate usage. It's not exactly like Assassin's Creed or Resident Evil. It's kind of like both of them.
Yeah.
Another example would be for me to ask, what kind of smartphone do you use? That's a fair usage.
Yeah. The problem is that we use it the other way so much that it simply adds to the perception that we're insecure or incompetent. And people will not follow us to Christ if they're perceiving us as insecure or incompetent.
So here's your assignment. You need to find out how much you use the phrase kind of, or its sister phrase, sort of.
Okay. And you'll need help in order to do that, because we do it unconsciously. Out of habit, we're not even aware of how many times we use it. So you need accountability partners, somebody who's going to be with you a lot of time during the day, during
And maybe
the evening.
several of them.
Yeah, you really do. People that are going to be around who can help you come to an awareness of how much you're using.
Once you find out how much you use it, if you find you're using it frequently, you need to stop it. How you can do that, one method is the annoyance method. As your accountability partners are keeping track of when you use it, they do what Dad did to me in the video.
What kind of hanging out? What kind of video game? What kind of Assassin's Creed? What kind of irritating?
Now, if it's more severe, Or if you want to improve quickly, you can use the method that I used with Jeremy.
You're going to love this.
Yeah.
Anytime I would say kind of, I would get punched.
Yeah. It's quite effective.
Yeah. Of course, turnabout was fair play. I got to punch him anytime he used powerless language.
I never used powerless language.
Mm-hmm. Why did you have to have shoulder surgery?
It will not go there.
No, not really. But what's fun about this is you can involve your entire church staff in this.
Yeah, it actually becomes a game.
Yeah. So anytime anybody on the staff uses the phrase kind of or sort of incorrectly, the other staff members get to punch them. Now, as we do more videos and teach you more powerless language, you will add those to your taboo list. And anytime anybody uses any of the words, phrases, syntax, any of those things that we will discuss on the taboo list, you get to punch them.
And that's guaranteed to change your speech patterns quickly.
Quickly.
Yeah.
So until next time, grow some balls.